All right, welcome. And Shadow's decided I need to carry him right now, so since he's the boss and all. Um, I wanted to do this after the deadline because we're always kind of surprised by what doesn't happen, right? And who doesn't move. But there's also players that I looked through each roster and I thought, there are surprises here that these guys are still with the teams, and I'll go through why. Now, with Carolina and Washington, I couldn't find anybody. I mean, I guess with Washington, I guess Richard Panik, maybe, but that's reaching. Jensen, maybe, but again, those are just guys that might have been throw-ins to a deal or maybe might have got dealt, but nothing substantial, nothing really noteworthy. In Carolina, much the same thing. Carolina trades guys in and out, and if a guy's been there for a while, there's a reason. So I wasn't able to find anybody on Carolina that I said, wow, I'm surprised he's still there. Maybe Mrazek. If I'm doing then it's not worth putting up there, and I don't know that I could defend it. So the other 29 candidates, and I limited myself to one from each team as usual. Ryan Miller in Anaheim didn't move. And I think this was probably twofold. Either A, he didn't want to move, which was always the rumor anyways, and B, I don't know how much interest there would have been. I don't know how many teams would have looked at Ryan Miller in the season he's had this year and said, okay, we're going to make an upgraded backup. This is who we need to go and get, is Ryan Miller, who's likely in his last year. Um, so yeah, Ryan Miller. Arizona, Taylor Hall. Hall's still there. Now, not that that's overly a surprise, but it does mean that Arizona is committed to trying to hold on to him, that they have every intention of signing him to a long-term extension. And whether or not he does that is totally his call, but they've made that commitment. So we'll see if that's a mutual thing or if Arizona's just the one making all the commitment here. Boston. So why would I have David Krejci up there? Simple reason. David Krejci, for years, I've read various articles here and there about how Krejci's contract is a hindrance and he doesn't quite play up to it, and if Boston could move it so they could keep other players. I would expect Krejci's name to get thrown around when they are trying to extend Torrey Krug, and the idea of trading Krejci's contract to try to keep Krug and then what they could do. I expect his name to start coming up again. Krejci does provide points. He does play well. Does he live up to his contract? Probably not. But again, I expect his name to come up. Buffalo, Rasmus Ristolainen, probably the reason that I'm doing this video. Ristolainen still being a Sabre is a huge surprise to most, I would think, because last summer he came out and said, I'm not happy. I don't like it. And he hasn't been. It's not like he's come out this year and gone, you know what? I take all that back. I'm quite happy here that I've seen, other than the platitudes you get like, well, this is my team and I'm here and I'm going to play and this is what I do and this is my job. There wasn't really a kumbaya moment for him. It's just sort of, yeah, I'm still here. I'll still play. I'm still here. I'm still here. But I think Ristolainen probably goes this summer. Maybe it's going to be one of those annual things. Calgary, Travis Hamonic. I think Hamonic would have moved at the deadline if not for injuries to other blue liners. I think once Giordano went down, I think Hamonic was sticking around. And then they actually added on the blue line at the deadline. I don't think Hamonic stays as a Flame this summer, but stranger things have happened. So we'll see what goes on there and who we end up seeing on their blue line, because if Olli Jokinen could go back to Calgary, see, he just gets tired of it and eventually jumps down. Bear will stay forever. But if Jokinen can go back to Calgary after the miserable experience he had the first time around, then sure, yep, Hamonic can stick around. I don't think he's had a miserable experience at all. Chicago, Corey Crawford. So the dust settles and Crawford's still their goalie. And it looks like they're going to try to extend him this summer. Crawford's still there. So Robin Leonard came in. I think Leonard outplayed him, but Leonard's now gone to Vegas. Leonard's also saying things about, how if you're going to look into contract negotiations, if you've come out and admitted you've had an abuse problem or mental problems in the past, GMs will use that against you in negotiations. So that's tough, and it's definitely something that will probably affect how much Leonard gets paid and for how long. So yeah, Crawford is still there. Colorado, Tyson Jost. There was a lot of smoke around Tyson Jost at the deadline, and apparently it was just that. The idea that they could use Jost to perhaps bring in a veteran and maybe add some money was the thought process here, but he's still there. And I don't know that he ever reaches the potential that they'd envisioned when they drafted him, but we'll see, right? Sometimes it takes players a while. So yeah, Colorado still with Jost. Alexander Wenberg in Columbus. Remember last year when he's being like sat out and he's fourth line and everything's miserable, and yeah, and he's still a Columbus Blue Jacket. He's still there. So he weathered that. I think it's been a better year this year than last year for him overall. I know the stats still aren't where he'd like them to be, or where obviously Columbus would probably like them to be, but he's still a Columbus Blue Jacket. So kudos to him for surviving John Tortorella's wrath. Stephen Johns in Dallas. Now this is one of those where I couldn't come up with somebody in Dallas that I'm surprised they didn't trade. So I went with, you know what, Johns being back in the lineup. He was sort of a depth defenseman for them in the first place. There would be people outside of Dallas who would go, oh, Johns, right. Yeah, he's still there. So that's kind of where I went with that. 13 games played. I believe it's 5 points so far. He's been pretty solid since returning. Jimmy Howard in Detroit. How many Howard rumors were there over the years that Howard was going to get moved? Last year, there was a lot of Howard rumors. And I don't know if Detroit could do it all over again if Jimmy Howard gets traded last year. I don't think he got moved this year due to the fact that I don't think there would have been a whole lot of value. His record, his overall stats, it all points in negative directions, even by Detroit standards. So I am mildly surprised he's still there, and I say mildly because, again, when you look at the deadline, I don't know that the value was there. I don't know that there was a team that would have wanted to pick him up. Oilers, Adam Larson. So the other half of the Taylor Hall trade, and Hall and Larson both being on the board, I think is interesting. I have Larson there only because for all of the slings and arrows he's had to suffer since he gets to Edmonton, he's still there. And he can still be a pretty solid defenseman night in and night out. I still believe that he can do that. And so we'll see with Larson how much longer he's an Oiler, but he's an Oiler right now. Florida, Mike Hoffman. How many rumors were there about Hoffman all year? All year was, okay, they're going to move Hoffman to bring in a defenseman. And they moved Trocheck and brought in forwards. So, yeah, Florida really threw us all for a loop. I think that's why Florida's taken a bath in the trade deadline grades. But Hoffman's still there. And I think that if they could find a way to hold on to him, they do. But I don't see how they make it work financially, especially with rumors of budget cuts being there and all. So yeah, Hoffman, I'm kind of surprised is still a Florida Panther. LA, Jeff Carter. There were rumors last year and rumors this year. Carter's going to get moved. And the rumor last year, and so I kind of kept that in mind this year when these rumors were coming up, were that he had the idea that if somebody traded him, he could just retire. That it would be, okay, so I'm getting moved to, let's just say New Jersey. Just throw it there. Okay, I'm moved from LA to New Jersey. No, I don't think so. I'm not going to New Jersey. I'm just going to retire. That will put a lot of general managers off. That will cause a lot of general managers to say, you know what, we're not interested. We need somebody who's going to be, showing up. And maybe general managers reach out to him and he goes, yeah, no, I don't want to play there. So that kind of thing. But I'm kind of surprised Jeff Carter's still there as the Kings go through the rebuild. And he's got 17 goals. There is some market value there, and he doesn't really fit the rebuild mold. Minnesota, Matt Dumba. I think they're going to have to make a move on the blue line this summer. Dumba and Brodin are still there. I went with Dumba only because I heard his name more than any of the others. And I think they make a move on their blue line this summer. Maybe with Susie out, maybe they felt they couldn't lose Dumba and still compete for a playoff spot. But I'm mildly surprised he's still there. And I would be very surprised if there's not a change on that blue line before the fall. Because Seattle's coming in and teams are going to start trying to figure out how to get around losing something major in the expansion draft, and Dumba could potentially, or Brodin could potentially be that major piece. And I think they would both have market value. Montreal, remember Carl Alsner? Yeah, Alsner came up. He's still in the organization. He's still there. And he is completely and totally forgettable from a depth standpoint until they call him up and you go, oh yeah, right, the old Alsner contract that they wish they hadn't signed, probably. So yeah, he is still there. He is still a member of the Montreal organization, still hasn't been bought out or moved or anything, so he is still there. Nashville, Kyle Turris, much the same kind of thing. Turris has had an up and down season this year, much like he did last year. It hasn't really clicked in Nashville as was anticipated when they picked him up from Ottawa. I love Turris in Ottawa. I think if somehow Turris found his way to a situation like that where he was the number 2 center, I think it would be ideal for him. And a team with a more wide open style, I think, would suit him better as well than what they employ in Nashville. I don't necessarily think that the way that he scores and their style necessarily mesh very well. But we're going to have to see if maybe he moves this summer. I'll be very interested to look back on this video once this summer's over and see if any of these names are still there, or if all of them are still there. Speaking of which, New Jersey, Corey Schneider, he's back to being the backup. Domingue's out. Ta-da! Schneider's the backup again. So there we go. Corey Schneider is back in the NHL. He got a win over Detroit. Everything's going just fine for Schneider right now. And again, it is kind of surprising he's there. With the Islanders, I went with Thomas Greiss, and I'll say why. 2 years ago, Thomas Greiss, miserable stats. Absolutely miserable stats. And the fact that he's still there and his stats are good. They're not great this year. They're not as good as last year. But they're still good, and it is mildly surprising. Greiss, still standing, still there. And odds are he's still going to be with the Islanders this coming fall, I would think. Although with Lou Lamoriello, you just never know. He might say, you know what, Varlamov should be the starter. I'll move Greiss out and I'll bring in a guy who's just a pure backup. Mark Stahl with the Rangers. Every year the New York Rangers get rid of a defenseman. Every year. It seems every year, and that'll be a video this summer where we look at the defenseman they've got rid of. And not only that, but I want to look at the defenseman they've got rid of, the defenseman they've brought in, and compare the guys that left to the guys that come in. Because it's weird to watch the Rangers with their blue line. And the fact Mark Stahl survives every single year, it's odd to me. Because they keep shuffling out defensemen, and I just keep waiting for Stahl. Not because I don't like Stahl or anything, but because they keep moving defensemen. So he'll probably go. Nope. Somebody else instead. This year was Brady Shea. So we'll see how things go for Shea, how things go for the Rangers from here, and how much longer Stahl can be their defenseman. I guess he retires there. Ron Hainsey with Ottawa. Now, I understand Hainsey's playing a leadership role in the dressing room, and they really like what he brings. But I'm surprised that at the deadline, nobody was able to pry him away from Pierre Dorion. So I don't know if there was a lack of offers, if they weren't interested in moving him or what it was, but I'm surprised that Hainsey wasn't moved on trade deadline day. So he's on just the 1-year contract, I do believe. We'll see if he signs for another year in Ottawa or what they do with him at the end of the season. But like he to me seems like the type that ends up being an assistant coach as soon as he retires. So we'll see if maybe that's what Ottawa's thinking, and that's why they didn't move him. Or again, maybe just the market wasn't there for them at the deadline. Philadelphia, Brian Elliott. You know why I mentioned Brian Elliott? Because Philadelphia went through how many goaltenders last year? And going into the summer, there was some debate about who they might keep and who they might get rid of. Not only did Elliott survive the purge of the Philadelphia goaltenders, but he's still there. Now his stats, not fantastic. I think he's got an .899 save percentage right now. Does he survive into next year? Oh, that's a whole new argument. Philadelphia and their goaltending mix that they do every year, it just completely seems to change with their goaltenders. We'll see if it continues this summer. But Elliott, he has survived until now. Jack Johnson in Pittsburgh. So remember going into the season, Jim Rutherford was like, oh yeah, the trade market's picking up. And the idea was that Jack Johnson was going to be on his way out. Jack Johnson is still a member of the Pittsburgh Blue Line. And not only is he there, but pretty prominent some games too, getting more ice time than you would think he'd be getting. And there you go. Jack Johnson's still a Penguin. Maybe he's still a Penguin in the fall. It's really weird. At least I find it odd. Joe Thornton in San Jose, he wanted out, and he's publicly said he wanted out after the deadline, that he was disappointed he didn't get moved. San Jose, who were supposed to be one of the better teams in the division. I am pegged for one of the better teams in the division, and it all blew up in their faces. I did think that they would take a hit with the players that they lost. I will say this, though, even if, let's just say they had kept Pavelski. Let's say they had kept Donskoy, and they had let Carlson walk. They would have cap space, but the drop that Pavelski's had in Dallas, I don't think it would be as steep with San Jose, but I still think it would have happened. I still think he would have experienced a drop from what was a fantastic year last year. And I don't know if they had kept everything together if it would have prevented this drop. I think last year's run, as fun as that was for them, I think that was kind of a last hurrah. We'll see. St. Louis, Troy Brouwer. So Brouwer's only played 13 games, but at the time where St. Louis got healthy, he got moved to the minors, and the word was they were going to discuss the situation with him, and then he's still there because they're still going through injuries. He's still there. So he even just got called up the other day. So Brouwer is still a member of the St. Louis organization, even though by all accounts, he was just kind of hanging on by a thread, a month ago? And he's still there. Tampa, Braden Coburn. Coburn's name comes up often from Tampa fans when they talk about defensemen they need to get an improvement on. Coburn's contract is probably part of the reason why he didn't get moved before now. I don't think the trade value is there for him either. But Braden Coburn still being a member of the Tampa Bay Lightning is kind of a surprise. So I threw him on the board. Much like Martin Marincin with Toronto. Toronto, there were a couple I could use, but Marincin to me is kind of a surprise in that I do remember him being the whipping boy online for Toronto fans over the last couple of years. And so he's still there. And when I see Marincin in the lineup, I kind of go, man, there are some Leaf fans out there right now that are like, why is Marincin in the lineup? Why haven't we improved our blue line to the point where we don't need Marincin? With probably some expletives in there as well. And Marincin, it is kind of a surprise that he's still there. But Kyle Dubas, he stays the course. For better or for worse, he stays the course, and he doesn't really vary very often in terms of who's where and who he keeps and who he gets rid of. He really has his mind made up when it comes to these players. Vancouver, Louis Eriksson, still a Canuck. Remember last summer? Oh, Travis Green doesn't give him a chance. We've asked to move on. The Canucks came out, yeah. We're trying to accommodate. We're gonna do our best. And then going into training camp, it was all right. So we've both agreed to just plug our nose and dive in, and we're gonna hope this isn't too painful. And this season, it's not so bad. Now Eriksson can't score. The hands as far as goal scoring, they're gone. It's points totals not great, and that's why they went out and got Toffoli. If Eriksson was producing the way Toffoli is, they wouldn't have needed to go and get Toffoli. And it is a surprise that Louis Eriksson's still there. And there hasn't been any word on any kind of friction, even when he was being a healthy scratch so much early in the year. And his cap hit is prohibitive. It is that cap hit for Louis Eriksson is meaning that the idea of keeping Toffoli is basically almost impossible. So we'll see what happens after this year if they figure something out. But with Eriksson, it's a tricky deal. Brandon Peary for Vegas. Now, with Vegas, I thought about using England, but I thought, you know what? I argued during the summer that they should bring England back. I can't now argue I'm surprised he's still there when I argued during the summer they should bring him back for 1 year on a cheap contract, which is what they did. And they really didn't have any options out there that were a whole lot better. It has got better since then, but Brandon Peary is still a member of this organization. He played 11 games, 1 assist, and despite the hot streak he went on last season, no, Peary's in the AHL. He's scoring relatively well in Chicago, but he's still there. He is still a member of the Vegas Golden Knights, technically. They could call him up for the playoff run. Washington, as I said, I don't have anybody for the Caps. I can't legitimately put anybody up there and say they're still there. And, you know, I could have done Holtby, but again, I understood why they kept him at the deadline, so, you know, it's not really a huge surprise to me Holtby's still there. And Winnipeg, you know what? Byfuglien. Now, Byfuglien's not a member of the team, so I put not really there because he's not actually on the team. But the fact that the Dustin Byfuglien situation never got cleared up. It was never, his contract was never taken off the books. They didn't really figure out a way to dissolve the contract. We haven't seen a situation yet where both sides seem to be really publicly happy with this. It's odd to me that it's hung over the Jets all season, and it has affected not the team on the ice, but it's affected the team they put on the ice. His cap hit absolutely has affected Cheveldayoff and tied his hands during the season. And I don't know that he'll use that excuse. Usually a GM will not use that excuse. but it's tough not to. It's a lot of money. And so when they finally get rid of this contract, it's going to be really interesting to see what happens with the Winnipeg Jets. Because that Byfuglien situation and just the fact that it kind of came out of nowhere, like, hey, he might retire. Wait, what? Wasn't he supposed to go to training camp? What do you mean he might retire? And now we're still at that point where he could just retire. And it's been said by Paul Maurice even that when he met with him, he got the impression that if he never plays hockey again, he's happy. He's quite happy with the way things are. So the fact that this situation never really got resolved before the deadline, I know they tried to move him and nobody took him in trade. Well, I can't see why anybody would. But I'm surprised that before that it wasn't resolved and that we've heard, well, they're going to dissolve the contract, and then they didn't. It's still there. So I just find that odd that it went almost the whole season, and it might actually submarine what could have been a great year for a very good young team in Winnipeg. So, we'll see. It remains to be seen whether or not they're going to make the playoffs, and once you make the playoffs, hey, if you've made it, you just never know. Look at last year, you never know. That could be the exception rather than the rule, but again, just getting in there can be good, and you still have a chance in any series you're in. But let me know what you guys think. So anybody that you think you're surprised is still there that's not on the board, let me know in the comment section below. This isn't something that I'm posting with the idea of starting arguments or any kind of an offense towards people. It's just sort of a looking over rosters and going, hey, I'm kind of surprised that guy's still there. Or, along that line, I'm surprised he's there after something that happened seasons prior. So let me know your thoughts in the comment section below as always. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. You just happened upon this video. Thank you guys for all your support. It means a lot. February is a very busy month with all the trades and everything. It's kind of nice when they're over and we can do this kind of thing and it's not crazy. But it'll start ramping up again as we start figuring out who's not in the playoffs, who's in, and the playoff matchups. Thank you guys for all your support. I will talk to you again soon.